The Wari acquired a great deal of their wealth through herding, and in particular, herding camelids, and that would be llamas or llamas in Spanish, and alpaca in particular. And they were definitely a source of wealth and a source of material for weaving, so they're particularly important. Their wool is in particular demand for purposes of weaving. The hat that we're looking at is an example. It is a four-cornered hat, which is a unique Wari shape. And you have one that's very similar in the textbook that is figure 133. The importance of llamas in Peru, particularly during the Wari period, is incredible. Even so much so that one of the rulers was buried in a, I'm not making this up, a llama-shaped tomb. The door of the tomb was the mouth of the llama, and the burial a little bit lower in a reference to the rest of the body of the llama was actually in the tail of the critter, the llama. So important enough to go to the next life in a tomb that is shaped like a camelid. This four-cornered hat happens to be in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where you can go see it. These hats were associated with elite. They were symbols of rank. The reason we have them is that, and we do assume that the people who wore these actually had something to do with the camelids, with the trade of the llama, the alpaca, particularly the llama perhaps, or products thereof, to the coast. And we do know that some of the materials, the fabrics on the coast incorporate cotton, which is local to the coast, and wool from the llamas, which is a part of the highlands. These hats then may be documents of the importance of the camelids themselves to the Wari, to the elite, to the wealth of the Wari people in general. They do have four sides, and they have four tassels on the top. That's typical of them. The Wari actually sew those on so that they're made separately. Anytime there's four of anything, I have to step back and say, well, are we dealing with the four directions? And I am going to assume that we probably are. According to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where this is located, the image in the panels, and again we have rectangles that form the foundation for the design. This critter here, and this clearly is a life form over here, and maybe I can make the best argument with this one over here, at least according to the Met. They say that these are llamas. They say that these are winged llamas, which would make them kind of supernatural as well. I can't tell you for sure if they are, but the Metropolitan Museum of Art seems to think they are. Other people have interpreted images like this as birds. The problem with that is that birdies don't have two sets of legs. There's one here and there's one here, but llamas do. So maybe I'm going to root for the llamas. Let me show you something else that makes that a little bit more certain. This is, for your delectation, a real llama, which is in the photograph on the left. We also have an amazing 4-inch, probably a pendant, because it has holes that were drilled in its back so that it could be suspended. It's a little Wari dignitary, and it's just amazingly crafted. It is an individual, rather large, staring eyes. It's a composite in terms of the materials that have been added to it. The nose is lapis lazuli. The hat, and that's this thing right up here, is actually made out of silver, and that looks a little bit like that greenstone that I showed you, the shape of the hat. But in addition to that, we have shell inlay. We also have lapis lazuli. Well, I already said lapis for the nose. But in addition to that, we have a spondylus, but we have different colors of spondylus than we would expect. And that would include, in particular, the purple and also, well, the orange, I guess we would expect from spondylus. So the orange and the purple. And the purple's pretty cool. What do they depict? They depict llamas. So we've got a llama here, a llama sideways, another llama, a llama down here, and a llama down here. So again, it is a reference to the importance of llamas in the economy, probably also as a status image. And what we're looking at is a portrayal of an individual who's wearing a poncho that is decorated with llamas. Another one of the four-cornered hats that come to us from the Wari, and another one of the examples, pretty easy to see over here, of the flying llamas, maybe. The images that I'm showing you include an abstract hat, designs that are abstract, and that would be in the lower right, and also a ceramic figure that help us to see that at the top right here, the ceramic figure is actually shown wearing one of these hats. So the hats themselves, which have been created as a product of fiber art, are pretty important status symbols and one of the hallmarks of the Wari. Textiles are one of the primary means of expression of the Wari, and they're particularly important for the Middle Horizon in general. As always, they're easy to carry, they're portable, and you can convey your ideas as well as convey associations with your status. Wari held the highland and the coast, and consequently we have from the coast, which is dry, we have a number of textiles that have survived fairly well. This is one of them. It's figure 132 in our textbook, and it is using, again, geometry, but in a very disorienting way, which is typical of Wari creations, almost vibrating on the surface, creating very complex designs. These images did tend to use a standard vocabulary, and often the creation was under the control of the state. So we have state-sponsored art, which helps to maintain quality, as well as some of the specific designs that are used. In this particular image, we have a kind of stepped diamond, which is being borrowed from Tiwanaku, but we also have very much a Wari interpretation of that, with the kind of experimental, playful way of taking separate pieces and sewing them together a little bit out of context, and by doing that, shifting the imagery and causing the surface to vibrate. What the artist has done has been to take an Andean cross, which is known as a chicana. I've got that word down here, and cut it apart. So let's look at the ones that are easy to see. This is a quarter of an Andean cross. This is another quarter of an Andean cross. This is the bottom quarter of an Andean cross. Sure enough, here's the other piece of the Andean cross over here. So the designer here has woven these images in fabric and then cut up the pieces or rearrange them, redesign them to create an even more abstract construction. All of this created based upon geometric shapes and forms. The chicana, and this is just a reminder of what the chicana looks like. This is a detail of that textile. Goes all the way back to Chavin and actually appears on some of the major carvings at Chavin de Wantar. Looking at the detail, you can see the panels that have been cut and sewn together. You can actually see some of the stitching, but this is that easier to read quarter of a chicana. And this is maybe my better slide because it shows you here we have a half top of a chicana that has been created out of two slightly different colors, and these also are being tie-dyed to create the color range, which is significant in Wari fabric design. This is also a Wari textile in our textbook. It's figure 135, and it's usually referred to as the Lima tapestry. And what it does is draw on a winged figure that appears on the sun gate. So it is associated with a religious source of iconography or symbolism. But the weaver has taken that single image, and if you go up here, this is the most easily recognized depiction of it in a kind of drawing form. And they have made it increasingly distorted by making it more and more geometrically reduced, more and more rectilinear, and ultimately more and more compressed, leading to a set of images that I gotta tell you, I find highly difficult to read, very illegible. They would be images, however, that would be, and I want you to think back to Chavin, easy to read by someone who was initiated, who understood, and who was aware of exactly what it is to look for. Someone, in other words, who was in. For our purposes, I would like you to understand that this represents Wari abstraction and the very, very rigid geometric shapes that are a part of Wari design. Let me just try my luck with one of these, and perhaps you can do better with the rest of them. This is our winged figure that is associated with the gate of the sun. This is the wing right here, and I'm hoping that this is the wing over here. This is the split eye, and this is the split eye that is associated with the figure. Reduced to fundamental geometric shapes and forms in a typical Wari way, adding to extreme abstraction and energy on the surface of the object. I'm including this, which might make it a little bit easier to actually translate the transition that the Wari artist is making with that weaving, beginning with this kind of figure over here, which would appear on the gate of the sun. Let me end with one more. This is figure 136 in our textbook, and it too is a Wari piece of clothing. And in this case, it is based upon step and wave patterns, which I think you can find with not much difficulty. But it's also got this sense of repetition, and then boom, let's throw something in that we don't expect, just like the just like the floor plan of the military compound that we looked at. And in this tunic, which is pretty much repeated row after row after row, well, whoops, if you can find my arrow right here and you go up 3 levels, there's a human face. And it has a split eye, which is associated with Wari. This was done on purpose, and it becomes, I think, something that is intended as humor, but it's also intended to vitalize the design that the Wari fabric designer is producing for us, and I think it works.